Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted, episode 20. This is a show about Anglicanism. Actually, it's about whatever George and I want it to be about. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today's December 5th, 2011.
All right, George, today in history we're going to wish a happy birthday. No, we don't have to sing, but 138 years ago, who was formed?
The Reformed Episcopal Church.
Yeah, they have an amazing story. They actually had some difficulties with the Anglo-Catholics at the time over an ecumenical service that was held in New York City, where they decided to have a Eucharist with the heathen Methodist and the heathen Presbyterians, and everybody else who was there. And Bishop Cummings at the time said, "That's it, enough with all you Episcopals." What happened since then?
Well, as you mentioned, the Reformed Episcopal Church was the evangelical wing of the Episcopal Church, and they had been engaged in a decades-old battle with Anglo-Catholics. And the inter-church Eucharist was the final straw. And Bishop Cummings, George Cummings of Kentucky, and 14 other leaders of the Episcopal Church's evangelical wing left to form this first breakaway movement in the Episcopal Church. And the church has remained smallish. It only has about 16,000 members, primarily on the East Coast, but it has remained true to its evangelical roots.
Yeah, it's an amazing church. It also encompasses some of the black Episcopal Church, and it has roots in Canada and all the way over in England. They formed a part of their Reformed Church. It's something that's unique, and we find all the way back 138 years later, they're one of the strongest partners in ACNA.
Yes, and what is, I think, extraordinary is that the descendants of the people with whom they were fighting in 1873 are now with them in ACNA. Fordham Faith and the Anglo-Catholic diocese like Fort Worth and San Joaquin, who are the descendants of the High Church Anglo-Catholics, have come together with the REC into a new body, the Anglican Church in North America.
Well, happy birthday, REC. I'm here at Long Beach at the Provincial Assembly for the ACNA, and I'm here with the presiding bishop, Leonard Richards, and you're with the Reformed Episcopal Church.
That's right.
Which, if my history serves me correct, you were the first entity to lead the Episcopal Church 137 years ago.
We were formed in 1873 in New York City.
That's an amazing history you guys have. At some point in the last few years, somebody came to you and said, "We have an idea. We want to form a province of all those who've left tech over the last 137 years." And I was wondering what your first impressions were when you heard this idea.
Well, our journey toward the province actually began with an initiative that we took together with the Anglican Province of America simply to establish a relationship among Orthodox Anglicans and to nurture fellowship, to find ways of cooperative mission and ministry. And as things developed, of course, we experienced such things as the Anglican Leaders Summit in the year 2000, I believe it was. And then we came together in the U.S. Anglican Congresses that took place in the years thereafter. But the real approach, so far as what led to the formation of the province, came when then Bishop Robert Duncan, the Diocese of Pittsburgh, called and asked if we would be willing to become partners in what was then formed as the Common Cause Partnership. And so out of that grew a growing association, one with another, that eventually led in the providence of God to the birth of the province. It was an exciting idea for me from the very beginning, because from 1873 onward, for decades, the Reformed Episcopal Church really operated in relative isolation, especially as far as Anglican connections were concerned.
Sure.
And to be invited to be part of something larger as fellow Anglicans and Orthodox Anglicans was an exciting opportunity for us, and I very gladly responded to that.
Well, it's amazing because you're an equal partner at this table.
Yes.
Of a church that's just taken off. 34% growth in a year, adult baptisms, growing churches, and I've been to a couple REC churches where they're excited about this new province. It's, you know, even if you talk to them before it formed, all is well, they would say, but now that it's something new, there's an excitement going on in the church.
It has energized the church. We just experienced that in a major way, coming together for our 53rd Triennial Council as a church in Dallas, Texas, and receiving the various mission reports, not only from North America, but actually from around the world, as to what is taking shape. A lot of it energized and encouraged by what's developing here in the province. Is really just an exciting and wonderful thing. God is working in unprecedented ways, I believe.
So, as we finish up here, is the REC's role in ACNA eventually all going to fold together in a dozen or so years, or do we want to maintain our identities and our history? What do you see coming out of this?
I think ultimately what we all want to see is the fulfillment of our Lord's heart's desire that his people be one as he and the Father are one. Exactly how that will take shape in terms of our coming together in the province, I think we have things that we obviously have to work on. I don't know how many years that will take. I think we have to be patient one with another. I think we have to wait, as we always must, for the Lord's right timing. Just as we did for the formation of the province itself. I think there were many who, in their own way, wanted to see something like this develop 20, 25, 30 years ago. This, I believe, was the right time. And I believe there will be a similarly right time for that fuller union that I do expect can take place and will take place as God leads and directs us.
Okay, George, oh good, you're wearing your bulletproof vest. We're going to talk about AMIA, the Anglican Church, the Anglican Mission in America. And there's been more new interesting stuff coming out of the province of Rwanda regarding this issue. Since episode 16, several weeks back, we've been talking about a little bit of friction between the province of Rwanda and AMIA, because AMIA wanted to form a missionary society. And the Church of Rwanda said, hold on, cease and desist. You don't have permission to do that on your own. You are a mission of Rwanda. Would you please discuss that with us? And this last week or 2 weeks ago, they had a meeting in D.C. And since that meeting, we got this brand new letter from the House of Bishops. And that letter says...
Yes, it was dated November 30th. And it was signed individually by each of the bishops of the Church of Rwanda. And it essentially called for honesty and transparency in the communications within the AMIA, and it gave the bishops of Rwanda's protection to the Renew DC group. They were praised for their honesty and their commitment to the church by raising problems within the organization.
And they also mentioned that Bishop Gerald Glenn is still a bishop in the Church of Rwanda. He may have resigned from AMIA, but he's more than welcome to participate fully as a bishop in their church. Amazing what's happened in the last 3 or 4 weeks, George. From where we started, you know, episode 17, going, what happened? Did we do this wrong?
Well, actually, we've been shown to be right on all of the main issues that we've been bringing forward. We've been pilloried by a lot of people, and you and I have received some very unkind emails. And we've also received emails asking for information. We've mentioned we've mentioned that how can you say that we believe in the real presence and transubstantiation? That's not what I do on Sunday. And we say, well, here are your canons. Look at this page and tell me, what do you see?
That's right. Yeah, a great deal. I would say almost 60% of our emails come from clergy and AMIA bishops saying, how dare you say we believe in this? We don't. We show them their canons that they signed, and they said, oh my gosh, I signed this. I didn't know that these were the new canons. So there is, a problem in signing documents you haven't read. We know what happens when the United States Congress does that. Well, guess what happens when you're a bishop and you do that too. So now we find ourselves with a continuing story. They've just had a meeting here in D.C. We don't know any of the results of that. That's being kept under hat, which, for all intents and purposes is probably good for now. But as this develops, either AMIA is going to have to remain under Rwanda, or they'll be able to let go and form their own society. But there's been rumors now about Bishop Murphy.
Yes, there was a story in the Christian Post that he was going to be retiring. And we've been receiving email communications from clergy and lay leaders saying, I attended this meeting and I was told Bishop Murphy was going to retire.
Well, since 2006, I've been told in any 2-year slot of time from 2006 on, Bishop Murphy is retiring in 2 years.
Well, we put it to Cynthia Brust, the press officer of the AMIA, and asked her, is it true? Is Bishop Murphy going to step down soon? And she said, no, Bishop Murphy has always said that he's going to retire in December of 2013. And there's nothing that has happened to change that.
And I'm going to have to agree that if they do form into a missionary society, it makes sense for Canon Kevin Donlin to stay on, for the current leadership to stay on, and for Bishop Murphy to stay on for at least 2 years to get this ball rolling. However, if Rwanda says you can't do it, I would imagine Bishop Murphy would, resign, and maybe some of the leadership in AMIA would as well. But in this whole picture, are we watching AMIA fold into like ACNA? Is that something that's happening here?
Yes, I think the bigger picture, there's several layers. There's the immediate fight around Bishop Murphy and what he's doing and what he's not doing. Then there's the second level of the Rwandan bishops feeling that they're not trusted and they're not receiving enough information. And then there's the bigger picture, which is the Rwandans want the AMIA to fold into the ACNA one day. That the bishops in Rwanda are telling us it was never our intention to have an exclusive Rwandan church in America in addition to other evangelical Orthodox Anglo-Catholic groups. And there's been a fight within the AMIA of, no, we don't want to go into the ACNA. But the Rwandans basically are saying, look, we did not get into this business to create little empires for people. We went into this for the glory of God, and that is what has to come first.
Yeah, and it's going to be an interesting process to watch that feather out. We watched the Church of Uganda consecrated John Guernsey. The Church of Kenya consecrated Bishop Murdoch and Bishop Atwood. And as soon as ACNA formed, they let them go. They said, hands off. There's now a safe place for Anglicanism in America. And that safe place continues today, and it's safe for AMIA. Way over in sunny California, we have Alan Haley on the line. And we're going to talk more legal stuff. He's our legal policy expert, and I think it's always good to have one of those when you're running a ministry like Anglican TV. Anglican TV started out in 2006, but in 2007 and 2008, we were videotaping some events over in San Joaquin. Specifically, we videotaped the initial announcement meeting by San Joaquin that they intended to change their constitution to leave the Episcopal Church, and then we showed up a year later where they actually voted and left the Episcopal Church.
And that is that this is the time of all times for us to walk the walk and not just talk the walk. And how important it is that people of this diocese see each other as the individuals that they are, and it would be tragic to have anyone referred to as less than a brother or a sister here in this diocese. And so toward that end, I'm calling upon our chaplain to pray particularly a prayer of unity.
So that tape has been out there for the longest time. But now, this has been 3, 4, 5 years. Basically, we've been in this legal rigmarole between a rump diocese that was set up by Tech after San Joaquin left the Episcopal Church, and we're finally getting to some depositions. And this week, Bishop John David Schofield was deposed. Tell me what happened, what's going on, and what we can expect to see in the future.
Yes, well, he was deposed, I have to say, not in the ecclesiastical sense, but in the legal sense, in which he sits down in a room with a lot of attorneys and a court reporter, and they ask him questions just as though he were at the trial.
Sure.
There's no judge there, but the testimony is taken down under oath, and in this case it was also made a video testimony. And then the testimony is written down in a booklet that he can review for accuracy, and then it is kept for use possibly at trial in the case that he's either not available, or if he does testify, and if they find that he testifies somewhat differently from what he says in the deposition, they can use the deposition to impeach him. Mm-hmm. So that was the occasion for, as I say, it was a deposition noticed in 10 different lawsuits in San Joaquin that are pending, and the room was full of attorneys, but we got through it in 2 days.
So they're not using the same attorney for all the different lawsuits?
Oh no, I'm sorry. On the Rump Diocese side, yes, there's one law firm that is representing the Rump Diocese in all 10 lawsuits.
Okay, all right.
And there's also the Episcopal Church attorneys who now have intervened in those lawsuits to represent the Episcopal Church's claims. So there were 3 attorneys there for the Episcopal Church and Rump Diocese side. And then there were a whole lot of other individual attorneys for the individual parishes that have been sued in each of the 9 different cases for that. And then, of course, I was there with as co-counsel for the diocese, the Bishop Schofield and his diocese.
So what is the defense or the position of San Joaquin?
Well, San Joaquin is, in the lawsuit that I'm personally helping with defend, that case is brought against the diocese itself and its corporate entities to try to recover all of their property, their bank accounts, the conference center they have up at Yosemite, and their cathedral and diocesan house in Fresno. And so that suit is not based on the Dennis Canon, because the Dennis Canon does not apply to property owned by dioceses. It just applies to property for parishes and missions. And they're making the claim that, a diocese cannot leave the Episcopal Church lawfully. So therefore, this act was unlawful, and they aren't entitled to take anything with them when they go. And our response to that is simply say, well, tell us where it says in the Constitution of the Episcopal Church that a diocese cannot leave the church. There's no language like that. It's just an argument they're making from inference. And if there were language in the Constitution forbidding dioceses from leaving once they joined, my position, and many attorneys think, that would violate the First Amendment, freedom of association. The Supreme Court long ago, in a case involving the NAACP, held that associations are free to associate their members and to disassociate their members. They have to be free to come and go under the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. So I think there's no case on that basis, but the Episcopal Church does, and so that's what we're litigating over, and it's now in its, 4th year, yeah. And we're heading into the 4th year, and still there's no trial in sight. We'll probably be going for a number of years yet.
I understand AnglicanTV was used at the deposition.
Yes. A question came up about what happened in the course of the convention proceedings, and to refresh exactly what had gone on. Everybody consulted the video online of Anglican TV that you made of the December 2000 convention.
So I need to take that offline.
I got that.
That's so sad, but let's hope it's used for good and not evil. But it's interesting how long these lawsuits take.
Yeah, there's no easy way. Litigation. I tell people, litigation is your absolute last resort to resolve a dispute because it takes a very, very long time. It's a random outcome. You can't predict which way the judges are going to go frequently. And it costs an awful lot of money. So why would anyone in his right mind, St. Paul had no clue as to what current lawsuits and courts are like, but he gave everyone the right advice. If you're Christians, take your dispute to another Christian to settle and do not go to the courts. And it was interesting because it came out in the deposition that when Bishop Lamb had been elected by the Rump Diocese, he immediately filed papers with the Secretary of State to make it look as though he was the current occupant of the corporation sole and therefore controlled all the diocese's property. And we wanted to resist that and go to court against him, and Archbishop Venables said, absolutely not. We will not file any lawsuits while this diocese is in the Southern Cone. And if they sue you, that all right, then you can defend. But so that's what we had to do. We had to wait until they filed their lawsuit, and we've been on the defensive ever since. Which
is interesting. It kind of puts you in a defensive position where you want to protect that legally, but Archbishop Venables did the right thing. It just took you longer to move through the courts because of not being able to be a proactive suer.
Yes, exactly. And, it's, as I say, going to court in the first place is not something you want to do right off the bat. You want to try every other avenue first to resolve matters. And only, it says, a last resort thing because it's such a drastic remedy and it takes so long and it costs so much.
Well, it was the last resort in the first century. It's the last resort in the 21st century. Okay, George, I learned in news this week that Bishop Lawrence has been found not guilty for abandoning the communion, which is very hard for me as a former Episcopalian to discover how they came to this conclusion. I was always under the impression, as a former Episcopalian, that a bishop in the church could read the canons, and if he disagreed with the canons, he didn't have to follow them, or he could rewrite the canons or reinterpret them. So that something like the Title IV Committee, which follows Canon Title IV, wouldn't really have to follow the jot and tittle of the law. But something really weird happened. 18 bishops, well, not all 18, but got together and could not find Mark Lawrence guilty of abandoning the communion.
Well, Kevin, you're not crazy for thinking what you do.
Okay, all right.
Now, there was a federal law case involving the Diocese of Washington and Sam Edwards.
Oh, sure.
And it involved Bishop Gene Dixon.
Mm-hmm.
Jane Dixon. Gene Dixon is the astrologist.
That's right.
I won't go down that road. Bishop Dixon basically broke the canons in refusing Sam Edwards' permission. Mm-hmm. And the federal court said a bishop can interpret the canons any way he or she desires because that person is the ultimate arbiter of what the rules are. Mm-hmm. So Bishop Dixon can turn black is white, white is black, and nobody can say boo to her. So your opinion that the bishops can do what they want without any recourse to reason, logic, common sense is absolutely true. So when the bishops actually acted with reason, logic, and common sense, read the canons, applied it to the situation, and came to a logical answer, I know it was shocking.
My whole worldview was... So it was like a Darth Vader moment. So the force was upset for a moment. You could just feel the whole what's going on here. But now we have, I don't know if it's a complication or not, but 2 weeks ago, Mark Lawrence, or his chancellor, issued quit claim deeds to all the churches, meaning the diocese has no claim of your property. You can do as you want as long as you're Episcopal.
Right. Well, Kevin, I could give each parish in the Diocese of South Carolina a quitclaim deed, and it would mean just as much.
Sure.
at the end of the day, a quitclaim deed is only as valid as your underlying claim. And when the Dennis Canon was thrown out by the South Carolina Supreme Court, it said, you look at the title, and the title determines ownership. So people who are trying to read into this a vast conspiracy being engineered by Rush Limbaugh and Mark Lawrence and all these nefarious conservatives to take South Carolina out of the Episcopal Church because of a quitclaim deed, are frankly loony. There's no legal, intellectual basis for that, but people are going to make that claim anyway.
No, and that's the purpose of the blogs, to keep all that alive. But it's still going to be an interesting story to see whether or not you have some.
Yeah, it's a wise, precautionary legal step that's being taken, but it's a tiny baby step done by the Diocese of South Carolina, not Mark Lawrence. Again, Mark Lawrence didn't do this.
No,
the diocese did it.
Yeah, since the beginning, Mark Lawrence says, I'm not leaving the Episcopal Church, and he hasn't. I'm not taking South Carolina out of the Episcopal Church, and he hasn't. I mean, you and I hear all the ground clutter, the stuff that doesn't make the news. Never have I ever heard of the Diocese of South Carolina calling up to Pittsburgh and saying, hey, what's the secret? We need to get what's the password? You know, none of the that noise that we hear about other stuff has come from the Diocese of South Carolina. They have been open and honest and truthful about not wanting to leave the Episcopal Church. And you know, all they're doing is trying to protect their property.
And one of the things that you really don't hear is the amount of pressure being put on the Diocese of South Carolina by the National Church, hiring attorneys who claim to represent the Episcopal Church in South Carolina, committees meeting of dissidents with officers from the National Church. Months go by and there's conversations between these two groups, and only then does Bishop Lawrence hear about things 6 months after a meeting. In other words, one of the things that it's difficult to report on is the amount of continued low-level harassment being waged by the National Church against the Diocese of South Carolina.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be a continuing story. You and I will probably be talking about this again in 2 weeks or shortly after Christmas, of how somebody has brought up charges of the quitclaim deed, and that's proof of the abandonment of the communion. We wish Mark Lawrence and the diocese well, and you know,
I should have been a lawyer in South Carolina because they're the only people going to make money out of this.
Yeah,
it's going to keep them busy for years.
It really is. If the Episcopal Church is crazy enough to go down that road. Right now, I mean, it's like...
That's not a very high standard.
No, it's not. But if you look at it, it's the one diocese that's all harbored up like a porcupine. Nobody wants to touch it because it's defended. It's very well protected, and they have very smart lawyers, and they have the legal system. The South Carolina legal system is on their side.
Yeah. There's 75 congregations in South Carolina, and only 5 of them are affiliated with the dissident groups. So we're not talking about a 51-49, you know, it could flip either way. Right. South Carolina is fairly solid in its united whole in its fight.
Okay, across the sea we have Peter Old. We're going to discuss a little bit about what's happening in the land over the pond. We have
England, I believe that's the word that you're looking for.
Right, England. the Mother Church.
Yes.
We have what's been going on the last dozen years is kind of the stylized same-sex marriage, same-sex blessing, same-sex something where a church doesn't really have the canonical authority to have a same-sex marriage, so they're looking for other ways around that to have some type of service for people who want to remain in a same-sex marriage in the church. Yeah. And what we find in little places in England is that that's happening.
Apparently so, according to some liberal activists, that is happening. What's happening Monday the 5th? So as this video goes out, the law's changing here in in England and Wales, and the law is changing so that a religious premises, if they want to, can register civil partnerships, which are like our civil unions over in the States. Now, the Church of England has said, we are not going to permit our churches to be used for that. And then they had to clarify and basically said, look, if General Synod says that we can do it, then we can do it. But until that happens, the default is it's not going to happen. So changing attitude, I've written a few blog posts in the last week or so, and they've been basically saying, well, this is just silly because we have blessings for civil partnerships as it is. You know, they happen already. For example, St Martin in the Fields, which is where the new Bishop of Salisbury has come from. So that was just a little bit of sort of little stirring away there. And that's rather interesting. Well, at least I thought it was interesting, because it seems that changing attitude are claiming that St Martin in the Fields conduct, and I quote, same-sex blessings. And what they even do, apparently, is when they send off their diocesan return of all the monies in, they actually put it down there as same-sex blessing and send it off, even though there's no reason to do that. Now, why is this significant? In 2005, when civil partnerships were introduced, the House of Bishops wrote a pastoral statement, a letter, which basically said clergy should give generous pastoral response to those members of the congregations entering into civil partnerships who wanted a quote, a service of prayer and dedication, but under no circumstances were they to bless a same-sex relationship. So you enter into a civil union, you can go and have a church service where there's a prayer and dedication, but this is the crucial, the priest cannot lay his hands, cannot invoke, cannot bless the couple. But apparently that's going on.
But there's so much a priest can bless. I mean, a priest can bless a shoelace if he wanted to.
Yeah, he could, but that's just silly, isn't it? You know, and priests go and bless nuclear submarines and fences on things, and that's absolutely rubbish. Because there are two aspects to the blessing. Okay, the priest, I'm one of those. I kind of know a bit about this. The priest, he blesses on behalf of the church, and the church says this is holy on behalf of God. So the priest is acting on behalf of God, saying this thing which is holy is holy. That's the root of a blessing. So it makes sense to bless the things that Christ tells us to bless and that Scripture tells us are holy. So, for example, to bless the congregation at the end of the service, those who are redeemed in Christ and called blessed by the Scriptures, that's okay to do that.
Absolutely.
To bless a marriage, which the Scriptures tell us is the signifier, the holy, mysterious signifier of the union of Christ and the church, which is holy, is a good thing to do. To bless the typewriter in the office, that's just rubbish. I wouldn't ever do that. So blessing's a good thing. And yes, the fact that priests and bishops bless all and sundry perhaps is getting in the way of an argument about what should a blessing actually be. A blessing should be the invocation, the statement of holiness of that which the Scripture says is holy. A bit of theology there for you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay.
We lack it too often. Well, let's go back to accountability. Is this church accountable to the bishop?
Well, this is very interesting. Nick Holtam, who was the vicar at St Martin in the Fields until recently, which is, as I said a bit earlier, which is where changing attitude said that there were same-sex blessings going on. He has now become Bishop of Salisbury. So I read this thing from Changing Attitude and thought, that's interesting. Let's go and do a bit of digging. So we took our spade, digged away, and here's a lovely sermon from Nick Holtam back in March 2010. And what does he say? He says, the form of service agreed by the Church of England when people come to church after civil marriage is not a blessing, but a service of prayer and dedication. I was on holiday when a service of prayer and dedication happened here, but St. Martin's supported in great number. The sky did not fall in or the ground open up, and I received no complaints. And now here's the crucial sentence, and this is a very, very good sentence. I have no doubt God bless them, but the Church of England is at best ambivalent about same-sex relationships, and for the time being declines to give its full authority by blessing them, and authority does matter. Now, I read that as Nick Holtum saying, see, Nick Holtum is the kind of liberal who gets promoted up the ranks because he knows not to rock the boat too much. He knows not to do provocative acts, to go ahead and do a same-sex blessing like Martin Dudley at Great Saint Bart's. He knows not to do stuff like that because A, it gets in the way of progress, and B, it'll scupper his career like that. So I read that, what he wrote, as basically saying, look, I'd like to do a same-sex blessing, but the church tells me I can't do it, so I'm not going to do it. I'm a man under authority. So what we've got here is changing attitude, saying that St. Martin in the Fields do same-sex blessings, and Nick Holtum, who was the vicar, saying, no, we don't. So who's telling the truth? Either changing attitude is telling the truth, in which case Nick Holtum is dissembling, in which case that's a serious question for a bishop. Or Nick Holtum, which I think is more likely, is telling the truth, and changing attitude are just trying to put the facts, present a fait accompli, which hasn't actually happened.
Well, what we have here is, a lot of times when I run into liberals, there's several truths. And we may be actually having...
There's my onion, let me peel it slowly.
This may be Colin Coward's, truth, and this may be Nick's truth. And, and it's interesting because it is something that's already happening. Here in America, it's already happening. In England, it's not quite so public, but it's happening.
I have to say, I've heard about quite a few of these services. Mm-hmm. I've read a few of the liturgies because I'm actually quite interested from a kind of academic perspective. How do you put together a same-sex liturgy? How does that work? How does that fit into doctrine of marriage? My experience is this, that these services tend to take one of two forms here in England. Firstly, you've got a priest who is absolutely clear he does not want to infringe the House of Bishop's statement. So he makes sure that there isn't a blessing within 100 meters of the service. Yeah. So the word holy and blessed never comes up. And I could probably show you a few examples of that. Or you get clergy who couldn't give a rat's thing in hell about what the bishops say, and they're just going to bless everything and bless it several times and spray some incense over it just to be sure. So it strikes me that what happened at St. Martin in the Fields, because they do have services of prayer and dedication and thanksgiving, is not a blessing, and that's the crucial aspect. The relationship is not blessed by the priest, therefore it is not a same-sex blessing, and legally that's really important.
Well, I'm sure this is going to stir up some debate, and we'll find out next week if it really, really was a blessing or really wasn't a blessing.
Who knows? Who knows? Or will everybody go, what was that about? Did somebody call? Or whatnot? Yes, the Church of England has a great habit of just finding a carpet and just sweeping things underneath it and pushing it out of the way. And let's not talk about it, because that would rock the boat a bit too much.
It's been actually a great practice for centuries, not just the last 7 years.
It is fudge. It's going to make some fudge.
George, let's move on to India. There was a Anglican priest, is he? He must be Anglican. Yes, of course he's Anglican. That's all we talk about is Anglicans. Who was arrested for 10 days. This is actually a sad story. Because of the influence of Muslims in the country who didn't like the fact that he was baptizing and proselytizing and actually had people interested in becoming Christians.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the fellow name is the Reverend Chandra Mani Khanna. Mm-hmm. He's the rector of All Saints Church in Srinagar, which is the capital of the Kashmir state in northern India. He had Muslim young men come to his church for several weeks, and they wanted to receive Holy Communion. And he said to them, well, you can't just receive Holy Communion, you have to undergo a course of training, catechism, and be baptized. See, they do it differently in India. Episcopal church, you just walk in, check your hat,
Got it.
And
He
whatever
follows.
you want.
He follows the canons.
He follows the canons, he follows the teachings of the faith. And 15 young men in their 20s were baptized. Well, this was filmed and was by some members of the family. It was put on YouTube. And the local Muslim leaders saw these videos and said, aha, he's offering these are fraudulent conversions. He's offering them money to become Christians. He's tricking these poor, simple young boys, and he's creating a public disturbance. Arrest him. And the police arrested him for creating a public nuisance. And he was imprisoned for 10, 12 days. And people like Michael Nazarali, the retired Bishop of Rochester, England, who knows Mr. Khanna, the rector of All Saints Church, said, look, this man is not some fire-breathing guy who's going to trick people into becoming a Christian. This is an outrageous violation of India's secular constitution.
Sure.
Yet, this man now lives in fear of his life. He's been arrested from prison, but he has to be in hiding because somebody's going to kill him.
Oh yeah. And here's the problem. People are going to say, well, wait, India aren't they Hindu? What do you mean Muslim? How can this be? Well, Muslim influence is taking over that whole region. Pakistan, Egypt, just go on, Libya, them all are slowly becoming Islamic, and it's Islamist.
They've always been Muslim.
Yes,
but they've been adopting a very extreme version of their religion. Mm-hmm. They don't live and let live anymore.
No,
the Islamists.
And so you find yourself in a place like India, which was Hindu influence for the longest time, now in fear for your life because of these strong connections they now have with the Muslim faith. And
if you remember last year, there were these attacks in hotels and train stations in Bombay, mm-hmm. Where Indian Muslims were committing acts of terror against their own people. India is a Hindu country, majority Hindu, and there's a very large Muslim majority. So they're becoming radicalized just like their brethren in Afghanistan and Pakistan and places like that.
Right. Which brings us to the strange dichotomy that to be a Christian it's safer to live under a totalitarian dictator than it is to live in a democracy in the Middle East.
You're safer in Syria as a Christian than you are in India.